Hi, thank you so much for joining us today. So we get a lot of questions from you about how Thrive365 was created. Dr. Black, could you give us some insight?
Lorianne, thanks very much for the opportunity to talk to people about this. It's a really interesting story. When I was working with Kraft, I was the chief nutrition officer there, and some folks in the marketing innovation team said, is there any way that we can work to help people with type 2 diabetes more easily manage their diet? It was a growing health challenge at the time. It's even worse now. And the focus was finding a way to help people with type 2 diabetes more easily manage their diet in a healthy way.
Can you tell us how the system was created?
Yeah, it was a long process, Lorianne. We recruited over 300 certified diabetes educators who were also dietitians. And then through an online assessment, we sort of collected their pooled knowledge, if you will, independently on over 250 foods that were assessed by the dietitians as to whether or not they were more suitable or less suitable for somebody living with type 2 diabetes. Once we had that, we took all the nutrition information that went with each one of those different foods, put that into a statistical modeling program. Then the statistical modeling program does its thing and it comes out with an equation. And that equation allows us to predict exactly where any other food beyond the 250, in other words, all the rest of the foods out there, would fit along that dimension of, is this suitable for somebody with type 2 diabetes? Is it really, really suitable? Or is it, you only want to have that once in a while and make sure you have lots of other food around it and everything in between?
That's so interesting. So you're telling me that with this system, somebody can just eat the way they're eating? How does this?
Yeah, one of the things that we found out, Lorianne, is that nobody wants to be on a type 2 diabetes diet. You want to eat the foods that you know. And the trick is knowing how to balance those foods against each other. And that's what Thrive365 helps you to do. So we have it structured so there are 3 meals in the day and a snack. And by doing that across the day, it helps to balance out the blood glucose levels. But importantly for individuals, we're saying this is the meal. There's a score that you have for your meal, and foods add up to that score. Maybe it's a 10, maybe it's 11 for that particular meal. As long as the foods that you're choosing will fit within that score. So maybe you can't have 3 Oreo cookies, but you might be able to put 1 in there. Whereas a lot of people have said, I can never have an Oreo cookie again. I can never have a piece of cake again. I could never have a cupcake again. Maybe not a full cupcake, but perhaps half a cupcake because it's within the context of a meal. It doesn't mean you can have a cupcake by itself at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Absolutely not. It's because you're eating it within that meal, and that helps to balance things out. And the scores drive you towards choosing more vegetables, more fruit, higher protein products. Those are the scores, those are the foods that typically score lower, and you can include more of those sorts of foods in your diet.
Yeah, so it's basically, as a diabetes care and education specialist, and we used to be called certified diabetes educators, so it's a little confusing for people, but now we're certified diabetes care and education specialists. And our goal is to help people eat, regularly throughout the day. So how is that encouraged or taught to somebody through this Thrive365?
That's a really good point, because when we were doing the testing with individuals in the clinical studies, one of the challenges was eating breakfast. A lot of people came to us and said, oh, I don't eat breakfast. Thrive365 is set up, just as you said, to help manage blood glucose over the course of the day. And that means that the score for the breakfast, the score for the lunch, and the score for the dinner are all the same. And then there's a snack. And the snack is about half the score of a meal. If you're having a late dinner, then you're having an afternoon snack. If you're having an earlier dinner, you might have a snack an hour or two before you go to bed, something like that. Because the scores are the same across the meals, yes, the foods you eat for breakfast are very different than the foods you eat for dinner, but because of that, the amount of food that you're eating is relatively consistent across the day. And it serves to really ensure that you're not seeing a rapid rise in blood glucose followed by a rapid fall, but a more consistent and moderated rise that helps you really manage those blood glucose levels over the course of the day.
I do like that, because a lot of times I see with people who, once they're diagnosed, all of a sudden they just throw their hands up in the air and they're like, "Ugh, I can't eat anything," right? And
Yep.
it's just frustrating. So I like the fact that you're helping people make their food choices throughout the day, because sometimes upon diagnosis, people just say, "I'm not going to eat anything," and then they're so hungry that they end up eating, right, all their food because they're starving. So I love this. Go ahead.
So that's so interesting, because I was just looking at some of the testimonial videos that we
interesting.
have last night, and in one of these, a woman said, "Oh, I just was never a breakfast eater, but I was going to stick to the program with Thrive365, and so I started eating breakfast, and it was a little difficult for me," she said, "in the first couple of days. But you know what I noticed? By the time lunch came around, I was ready to eat, but I wasn't starving.
Yeah.
And by the time dinner came around, I was ready to eat, but I wasn't starving." And she kept on saying this, and she said, "And my cravings during the afternoon went away." And it's not magic.
Right.
And it's just helping people to understand. And the other thing that goes along with that is, we found that many people who are living with type 2 diabetes, they tend to constrain the foods that they eat. They think, these are the only ones I'm allowed. And what Thrive365 does is allow them to look at a much, much larger universe of foods that, yep, you can fit those within your meal plans too. And it's so easy to use. That was the other thing we heard repeatedly. It's so easy to use.
Yeah, I actually like the fact that it increases people's variety, because we know that, once you have a chronic illness or something, you kind of the world gets a little smaller, and you feel like, well, these foods are safe and these foods I can't have. So is there any food really that is not included in the program?
What we find is that the servings, a single serving of some foods may score very, very high for a full serving. And you would not be able to have a full serving of that. But you might be able to have half a serving or a quarter serving. So in the case of cookies, usually I think the FDA defines a serving as 3 cookies. You might not be able to have 3 cookies.
Right.
But you probably could fit 1 cookie in as your dessert. And when people have been denying themselves the pleasure of just their favorite cookie, whatever that cookie might be, for I don't know how many years, and all of a sudden, you mean I can have one of those for dessert?
Yeah.
To see the expression on their face when they realize that, okay, I can't have a half a box, I can't have 3 or 4 of them, but I can still have one and enjoy that one within the context of a meal. It's really, really rewarding to see that happen.
And I think also it also goes to like being able to go out to eat. So if you go out to eat, right, you don't have to forego a steak or something, right? So you can have a smaller amount and it fits in.
Absolutely, absolutely. So there are a couple things that we found with restaurants. The first thing I would say is that you mentioned a steak. Lorianne, with Thrive365, higher protein foods typically have a lower score. So it's easy to incorporate those in. But when you look at the meal that's presented at a restaurant, sometimes the serving sizes are enormous.
Well, we're Americans.
Yes.
We're known for that.
And a score, so my personal score is, my meal score is 14.
Okay.
So if I ordered something from a restaurant, and with Thrive365, you can open up the interface and look and see in the restaurant that you're in, and it'll tell you the score of menu items there. But let's pretend that for easy math that something scored a 28. Far too much food. But I can take that, cut it in half, literally cut it in half, have the restaurant put half in a carry-away bag, and I'll take the rest, and that's what my meal will be. And you're not worried now about, is this allowed? Yes, I'd have to have water or a sugar-free soda or something like that, or a cup of coffee or a cup of tea to go along with it. But you can now eat in restaurants, and you can make that decision in the moment.
Right.
In the moment. You don't have to pre-plan that, because you can just look on your smartphone and say, oh, I am at this restaurant. Okay, yes, I'll have that, please. Whatever, I'll have the steak and potatoes, please.
Right. I love the concept of moderation, because I think that's really something that, we try to help people learn. And I really enjoy the fact that it's kind of within the entire program, and you can talk to people and say you don't have to give things up, you just need to learn how to eat them so that it's healthier for your body and it keeps your blood sugars stable throughout the day. Are there any other things in terms of making food choices that came out in the testimonials from anybody else?
Yes, there were a couple of things. One of the comments was that people said, I found myself choosing more vegetables, sometimes more fruits as well. People tended to choose fruits in just normal diets. People prefer fruits to vegetables anyways, but people were choosing more vegetables. The reason I think they were choosing more vegetables is because typically a vegetable will score a 0 or a 1. And so vegetables are very easy to include in your meal. And it can be any kind of vegetable. So that was what we saw happen. We also saw that when we analyzed the diet as a whole, that let's say the quality of the carbohydrates improved. And by that I mean the carbohydrates, there were fewer of the simple carbs and more of the complex carbohydrates. That is driven by the scoring system, the algorithm that underpins the score, and it results in this moderation of the rate of rise in blood glucose after a meal, I believe. So yeah, it drove people towards more protein, it drove them towards, without them actually saying I was aware of that, the vegetables they identified, more vegetables in their diet, and the higher quality of carbohydrates. Another comment was fried foods diminished in my menus, in my meals. I found I was eating fewer fried foods, and that probably goes along with some of the higher saturated fat content foods, I would think.
Yeah, I like that. I always said when I was in practice that I just needed a stamp, and I would just, eat your vegetables and just, stamp people's sheets.
Yeah, but it's not just vegetables. And that's the other thing I want people to understand about this. This is not just a eat your vegetables approach. It is not. It's a very, very flexible approach. People have control once again over their meals. It's not, if people have been feeling, I'm just told what I can't eat. One gentleman said to us, my wife always told me, you can't have that, you can't have that, you can't have that. Didn't you hear the doctor? I'm so tired of people telling me what I can't have. And with Thrive365, we end up saying, you can have that, perhaps not as much as you used to have, but you can still have it when you have it within the context of your meal.